Welcome to the Gen Z Marketer Podcast, the show for the up and coming generation of marketers. Here we talk about marketing, branding, e commerce, and the power of integrated marketing communication. I'm your host, Jamia O'Malley, a strategist passionate and specializing in branding and marketing for e commerce. The political campaign season has officially begun, and some brands have posted content expressing their political stance. With this, let's talk about whether brands should be neutral on politics. So, what happens when brands take a stand? How does this impact brands and their customers? If taking a political stance, how should you do it? Keep on listening as we answer these questions. Before we get to it, don't forget to support the show by following the podcast to get notified on the latest uploads. So, as times change, so does consumer and brand behavior. Years ago, it was normal for brands to not involve themselves in politics. Now, brands worldwide are taking a stand in political issues, are advocates for change, and have corporate social responsibility efforts. With most Western brands taking a stand, should the Philippines follow suit? So, some brands have started to take stand in environmental and social issues, but fewer do so for actual politics or actual government politics. But this is slowly changing as well. So, what inspired the change and encouraged brands to speak up? First is the call for action. Gen Z, which is the dominant or slowly becoming the dominant market, is more social aware compared to millennials. They think that being neutral in timely issues is also a stance. So, as these generations value authenticity and are proactive in taking action among social issues, brands have started to follow suit. They appreciate brands that take action and will call out those who don't or miss the mark when they do. Second are the timely issues. So, there are a lot of relevant causes in our time, such as the environment, employment, race, religion, politics, and more. So for some brands, some issues are more relevant and timely than others. So some of these issues also affect how brands do business. Third is the value of advocacies and CSR. The advocacies or CSR efforts of brands are also efforts in being involved in social issues and for some taking a stand. So this adds value, character, and soul to a brand. This also makes it the norm for brands to step up and go beyond the tradition of just doing business. So they also want to involve themselves in the community and society. And last is the reason why some brands are really making efforts to speak up is because of the influence of their own owners or their founders. There are some brand owners who are proactive in having their own advocacies and stance on relevant issues and make efforts to integrate these in the way that they do business internally and externally. So they also make use of their businesses or their brands as an outlet or an extension of their advocacies and make an effort to speak up or support certain causes. So, is it causing brands harm if they take a stand? Well, it depends. When brands launch campaigns about political issues, it can be a hit or a miss. So, the execution of a campaign can make or break it. Some brands that actually try to be politically relevant miss the mark because of their messaging, campaign design, wording, choice of ambassadors, and more. So they seem tone deaf, inauthentic, and for some would be tagged as clout chasing or trying to piggyback on trends or issues. Pepsi is an example of a brand that launched a tone deaf campaign. Years ago, they released an ad with Kendall Jenner that drew a lot of criticism. In the ad, Kendall eases the tension between protesters and police by handing a cop a can of Pepsi. So the ad was pulled out immediately due to the backlash, as the ad's messaging, visual storyboard, and choosing ambassador did not fit together. Like the whole ad just seemed very off. It felt like the brand was trying to piggyback on the protest movement. They also chose an ambassador who isn't known to be proactive in political issues, making the ad more inauthentic or a money grab because they chose an ambassador that was popular. The message of the campaign, or what they were trying to say or trying to communicate, could have worked, but the way they communicated it didn't really work. Like they could have expressed their thought or message in a better way. Meanwhile, Nike took a calculated risk when they launched an ad featuring Colin Kaepernick years ago. The ad also featured Serena Williams and LeBron James, but Colin was, at that time of the release of the ad, he was known for taking a stand on police brutality during the NFL games. So the athlete's actions resulted to him not being able to play, and yet Nike still featured him in a campaign. So during the time of this campaign was when this campaign was released, it was quite controversial for some. So it did create a lot of buzz. So the viral campaign's messaging is, and I quote, believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. Just do it. So there was backlash, as we said, from some when the campaign launched, but overall it did Nike more good than harm. Because even though there was some backlash, there were some people who claimed they wanted to boycott Nike, some people, burning the merch. But eventually, in the long term, it actually cost them more good because there were a lot of people who supported them for taking action or taking a stand. So it was the campaign was also very on brand for Nike. So it was on brand, and the execution was very authentic and meaningful. So what can we learn from these cases? So as marketers, what do we keep in mind when making a political statement? First is that risks are a given. First is that risks are a given. So are you worried about the aftermath of making a statement and losing customers? Well, in the law of physics, we know that in every action, there is an equal reaction. So if you do take a stand, there will definitely be, an aftershock or an effect. So, but Nike is proof that when you do this right, you can gain more than what you lose. This is something that I've also said in previous episodes, which I will reiterate. Brands cannot be everything to everyone, and not everyone will love you. So when you say when you take a stand or you take a risk, some people will like it, some people will don't. But the right audience will. So when you take a risk, you should be very thoughtful and mindful when you do it. Next is that there should be no BS when you take a stand. So millennials and especially Gen Z can see through the BS. They know when you're being inauthentic, as seen with Pepsi. They can tell when you're ingenuine with your campaign, advocacy, and stance. They will call you out when your actions do not match your words and vice versa. So you need to be true to them, and they will be your evangelists. Next is that personalities are your extensions. So sometimes your campaigns will involve personalities. So be it celebrities, influencers, or professionals. So when Pepsi chose Kendall Jenner, she was not necessarily the right fit for the message they wanted to convey, as it is not something she's known for. So, meanwhile, Nike's chosen ambassadors are known to be agents of change who worked hard for their dreams, reiterating and extending the campaign's messaging. So, your ambassadors say a lot. about who you are, what you value, what you encourage, and tolerate. This is also why most react strongly depending on a brand's chosen ambassador or when the chosen ambassador has issues. Next is silence actually says a lot. At this time and age, silence is seen as a stance and sign of neutrality. And neutrality is a show of tolerance and enabling on oppressors. So, as marketers or brands, you should know when to speak up, why you're speaking up, who you're speaking up for, and you need to be thoughtful when doing so. So, we've said this also that you need to be mindful when you're executing these campaigns. Ultimately, you need to also be researched enough. Like this should be really carefully thought of. This shouldn't be something that you do just because. Okay. So the question is, should brands be apolitical or not? Overall, I think it depends on the issue, the brand, the target audience, and how you plan to take your stand. Because some of the examples we mentioned earlier are not as political as others. So, what about in the interest of national elections or government policies? When it comes to elections or government policies, I think brands should be more cautious in how they would take a stand. So, as we mentioned earlier, you need to be mindful of why you're taking a stand and how you'll express it. So, don't jump on bandwagons unless you want to see it through. Also, if you are going to take a stand, as we said, risks are given, so you need to be ready for what comes or what the reaction could be. I think it's also important to note that whatever it is that you say or whatever support you want to express and all of those things, it would really reflect a lot on who you are as a brand. And brands that do speak up resonate more with the younger generation, particularly Gen Z. So, as we are slowly dominating the market, the workforce, and we're gaining spending power, brands should keep up with the behavior and preferences of the emerging markets or emerging generations. So, when you're taking a stand, be authentic in doing so rather than just because. Otherwise, they'll see through you and they will call you out, as we said. So, personally, and as a consumer, I do admire brands who take stands that empower the oppressed. I think it's a reflection of who they are and what they do says a lot about them. I think when they have the courage to speak up or to take a stand or to be involved, it means that they are not just businesses. They are also brands with a heart, with a soul, with integrity, with values, who want to be involved in the community, who care for their community and everyone. So that is why I think overall, for me also as a consumer, I do like brands that take a stand, especially when they take a stand that, empowers the oppressed, when you know that they really thought it through, and when they're really supporting a marginalized group. So, do you think brands should stay apolitical? So, are there any brands that you admire for taking a stand? Actually, there are some brands that I remember who specifically build their branding around taking a stand. So, there's also that. That's really the norm at this point. It's starting to emerge as a trend, as a norm for brands to be involved in the community and go beyond just doing business. So I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are there any other brands that you can think of when it comes to taking political stances and whatnot? So you can find me at the Gen Z Marketer Podcast on Facebook, at Gen Z MKT on Instagram, and at www.genzmkt.com.